we don't raise the hands. But the crux of the matter is that it is based on which is more virtuous. And this is what an example I'm giving you. Now what's happened is we have disagreements on the same mas'ala, and people end up abusing each other verbally, physically, backbiting, etc., forgetting the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that sibabul muslimi fusuqun wa qitaluhu kufrun, that verbally abusing another Muslim constitutes a person to become a fasiq, a extreme sinner, and to fight him physically is tantamount to kufr, disbelief. So we forget this concept of fighting another Muslim is haram just to uphold a virtuous act. So my point is that the lesson we're going to do today, the purpose of it is to gain an insight into the principles of jurisprudence. Usul al-fiqh, jurisprudence, and the sciences behind these four schools of thought. Gain an insight into them and also create an awareness of the complexities of Islamic knowledge. Now, Islamic knowledge, what's happened, I think I've got it in my next slide. So I've got these three statements. Sahih Hadith, Quran and Sunnah do not follow an Imam. Now, if I can ask, if there's a show of hands, how many people have heard of this statement, Sahih Hadith? Show of hands. Very few. Okay. Now, I'd like to ask Mushtaq Bhai here, Musalli. So, what's your concept of Sahih Hadith? When you are told or when you see or hear someone say Sahih Hadith, what's your concept?
When it comes to Bukhari Sharif, it's from the
Bukhari Sharif. Okay. And that's it. But in terms of application of these hadith, what's your concept? Anyone else? Abdul Razak Bhai? Not Abdul Razak Bhai. Abdul Karim Bhai. What's your concept? You put your hand up. So, Sahih Hadith, what's your concept?
Hadith must be authentic.
Authentic. Okay, authentic. Okay. Verified. Okay. It's an authentic hadith. So in terms of application of this authentic hadith, have you come to any conclusion or have you been convinced to come to any conclusion?
I don't think my knowledge is, I just don't have the knowledge. I've been guided by Allah's.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else that's put their hand up as well? Usman? No?
The 6 books of the Bukhari
It is listed in the 4 books of Hadith.
Mhm.
And it is okay.
Second? You think? They're all authentic. Okay. Sound. Okay. You
Not
think?
saying that 4 books of Hadith
Mhm.
that we know, Sahih Sitta.
Okay.
If it is listed in there, then you accept it.
Accept it. Okay. I like that concept. That, not that without showing disrespect, that's not the correct concept, but that's the concept I was looking for. You know, Sahih Hadith. The concept of Sahih Hadith you'll find today is that in any mas'ala, if the hadith that's presented is Sahih, then we have to take it on board and we cannot reject it. So anyway, these statements, I'm going to discuss towards the end, inshallah. So I've got another slide at the end, coming back to these statements. So now we've got the four schools of thought. Now the four schools of thought, you will see, if you just look at this slide here, the Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad. Imam Abu Hanifa was the earliest. So he was born in 80 after Hijri. So 80 years after the Hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was born. And Imam Ahmad, he passed away in 241 after Hijri. So obviously, before these four Imams, there was a period, a minimum of 80 years. So what was life like before the four Imams? So naturally, when the Prophet ﷺ was alive, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the companions, they all would return. The marja', the return place would be to the Prophet ﷺ for every matter. So any matter that is related to the Sharia, naturally, metaphysically, the only option is to return to the Prophet ﷺ and ask him, Ya Rasulullah, these are the issues, these are the concerns, what do we do, how do we go about it? And the Prophet ﷺ would deliver. Often what would happen, that they would come to the Prophet ﷺ and they would present the case, and the Prophet ﷺ, he did not have an answer. He did not have an answer to that. So he'd wait for revelation, and when revelation came, he would call that person who had come to ask, and he said, that question that you asked, this is the answer to that question. Now that revelation could be instant or it could be delayed. That is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they all referred back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And by the way, if at any point, if you feel that you need to ask a question and it's confusing, just put your hand up. Okay. This is not bayan that I'm going to deliver. It's a dialogue, it's a conversation between ourselves. I'm sitting here in the chair. So anyway, so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the marja' where they would go back and speak to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they would ask him the questions. Now, amongst the Sahaba, those that were considered the most knowledgeable from the Sahaba radiallahu anhum are Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Aisha radiallahu anh, Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu anh. They were few of the Sahaba, there were many more, but they were considered the most knowledgeable. So yeah, the likes of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anh, and we will come to them later on. So when you understand that concept, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is alive, any issues, go straight back to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you will find a solution there. Moving on, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam departed this dunya, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam departed this dunya, what happened was the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they became the reference point. So those that came after the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the Tabi'un, so I've listed here the Tabi'un, Sa'id ibn Musayyib radiallahu anhu, Mujahid ibn Ata, Hasan al-Basri, Urwat ibn Zubair, Ikrima, they were all Tabi'un, those that were companions of the Sahaba. So a Tabi'i is that individual who hasn't seen the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but he's seen the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So for them, the Tabi'un, and even the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the reference points was the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So they could go to any Sahabi and they would ask that Sahabi that, do you have any information, knowledge? Do you have any opening regarding this particular mas'ala? And if he did, he would present it to them. And if he didn't, then he would refer them to another Sahabi who did know. So that responsibility of conveying the knowledge was upon the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the galaxy of Sahaba in totality. And they done this. Now we come to the time of the Tabi'un, and they are conveying the message as well. They are conveying the message as well. And who are they conveying the message to? Their students. At this point, we want to see how far Islam has spread. So, during the time of Umar radiallahu anh, he gave the orders for the city of Kufa, which is in Iraq, to be built. A new city to be built from scratch in Kufa. And during the time of Ali radiallahu anh, the headquarters, the capital of the Islamic Khilafah was moved from Madinatul Munawwara to Kufa. To Kufa. So Kufa is toward the north of present day, the Arabian Peninsula, Iraq. From the west, it has gone up to Gaza, Palestine, Sham. From the east, it's gone up to the Arabian Peninsula and further. And from the south, it's gone to Yemen and the northern African countries. So by now, Islam has spread quite far. And because there was no particular reference point, as there was during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the people, they were referring to their scholars, to their local scholars. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he was born in Kufa, Iraq. He was born in Kufa, Iraq. And he was born in the year 80 Hijri, passed away in 150. Who was his teacher? Imam Abu Hanifa's teacher was Hamad, whose teacher was Ibrahim al-Nakha'i. They were both tabi'i, who both learned from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. So these are the chain of narration for Imam Abu Hanifa rahmatullah alayh. Now when you look at Imam Malik, he was born approximately 13 years after Imam Abu Hanifa, but geographically it was very far, because he was born in Medina and he resided in Medina. So who were the teachers? And I'm just narrating one example of some of the teachers. They had many teachers there, teachers in the hundreds. But I'm just giving one example. So Imam Malik, his teacher was Nafi', whose teacher was Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anh, who learned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imam Shafi'i, who was born in Gaza but grew up in Makkah al-Mukarramah. His teacher was Imam Malik, as we mentioned, again whose teacher was Imam Nafi', who learned from Abdullah ibn Umar, who learned from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then you have Imam Ahmad, who was born in 164, who learned from Imam Shafi'i as well, who learned from Imam Malik, who learned from Imam Nafi' and Abdullah ibn Umar and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are the four Imams. These are the four Imams that we know of today. But does it mean they were the only four Imams at the time? No. There were many Imams. Hassan Basri, Dawood Zahiri, endless. But when you speak about the four schools of thought, And when we ask this question, that these four schools of thoughts, are they divine? The answer is yes. Might not be directly divine, but indirectly they are divine. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen these four imams and their schools and made it sure that in the end of time, these four imams and their schools of thought will prevail. Otherwise, there were many other imams and they had schools of thoughts, but they did not prevail. So this is called inaya ilahiyya, divine or the divinity of the four schools of thoughts. So what happened and how did they develop? How did these four schools of thought develop? These four imams, at no point did they sit down and think that I'm sitting down and I'm going to write a book and I'm going to present my school of thought. This was done later. The idea of making it into a particular school of thought was done later. The four imams themselves, they just done what their responsibility was, which was when people came and asked the mas'ala, they gave their opinion. They gave their opinion. And naturally, like I said earlier, the Imam Abu Hanifa, you will find, because his teacher was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, so many of the opinions of Imam Abu Hanifa are in accordance to the opinion of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu. Imam Malik, many of his opinions are in accordance to Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, many of their opinions are in accordance to Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. Because Imam Shafi'i, he grew up in Makkah al-Mukarramah, and at the time Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he had resided in Makkah al-Mukarramah, so his school, his understanding prevailed in Makkah al-Mukarramah. So they're known as the Abadilat al-Thalatha, the three Abdullahs. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah ibn Abbas, and Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. So what happened? They had their students. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he had the likes of Imam Muhammad, Imam Abu Yusuf, and many of the students. And they would pass on this message. Now, out of these four imams, Imam Abu Hanifa did not have a book in fiqh. He did not have a book in fiqh. Imam Malik, he did have a book. He wrote it himself, Muwatta Malik. Muwatta Malik, which was written by Imam Malik. Imam Shafi'i, he wrote a book on usul, Islamic principles of jurisprudence, usul al-fiqh. He was the first imam to actually pen a book on usul al-fiqh. The first imam to pen a book on usul al-fiqh. I'm seeing a lot of confused faces. Is it confusing? No, it's okay. It's okay. Okay. So, now, one of my intentions for this presentation was to make you all aware that Islam is not simple as Sahih Hadith and I'm going to accept. That's why I said that at the beginning, Sahih Hadith. This, I thought of this, and I thought this maybe it's going to be too confusing, but one of my intention was that if it is too confusing, it will send out the message that, hold on, it's not as simple as people make it look like, that it's Sahih Hadith and Quran and that's it. It's not as simple as that. Okay. So every science has usul principles. Every field, every science has usul and principles. So you have those people that are hadith, into the field of hadith. They also have a principles, and I will explain later on. Tafsir, there's usul in that as well. There's a set of principles as well. In language, there's principles as well. In usul al-fiqh, there's principles as well. And the reason for these principles are that those that come afterwards can understand how the salaf, those that came previously, came to that conclusion. Now, the four schools of thoughts, they differed. They differed in many masails. They were unanimous in their usul, in their principle, they were unanimous on four things. On Quran, Sunnah, Ijima, and Qiyas. On Quran, Sunnah, Ijma, and Qiyas. If ever they needed to find a mas'ala, if ever they were presented with a mas'ala, the first thing that they resorted to was the Quran. Can we find the answer to this mas'ala in the Quran? If we can't find it in the Quran, we will look into the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the next step, next stage. Now, be aware that it doesn't say after Quran, it doesn't say Sahih Hadith. It doesn't say what? Sahih Hadith. It says the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that encompasses many, many different science itself. If it's not found in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then they will look and see the Ijma. The Ijma is the unanimous agreement that possibly the Sahaba radiallahu anhum or those that came after them, the Tabi'un, they may have unanimously agreed on a particular point, on a particular mas'ala. So we look in the Ijma. And then if you don't find it in that, then they look for Qiyas. All these four are agreed upon. By all the imams. So now, the question here, do I have to follow one of the four schools of law?
Just go back to the last slide there.
Because
Sorry, I'm not sure what qiyas is.
Qiyas, sorry, I didn't explain. So qiyas is when you analyze. So you couldn't find something in the Quran. There was nothing in the Sunnah. There was nothing in Ijma'. Now what do? So a particular mas'ala has come about, and generally qiyas refers to a modern mas'ala. Like, I'll give you an example. One of the modern mas'ala is milk banks. That when a mother, can she donate milk? And can that milk be utilized by others? So it's a mas'ala that previously hasn't been discussed at a bank. So anyway, when you can't find the answer in these three, the first three, what needs to happen is you find a mas'ala which is similar to the one that you are dealing with now. And then you say, and this is in a nutshell, you say that in this mas'ala, the ulama, the fuqaha, they've come to this conclusion. So the mas'ala we have at hand is quite similar to the one that they've already come to conclusion. So we're going to analyze both of these and we'll come to the same conclusion as well. So qiyas is a very, very detailed subject. Now, these four, Quran, Sunnah, Ijma and Qiyas, just to shed some light, we briefly covered these four. We briefly covered these four over 4 years. That's briefly, over 4 years. Qiyas, we had to study for 1 whole year. And that was briefly. That was briefly. Again, the purpose of why I'm saying this is because we see too often people have made our sharia, our deen, very simple for themselves. This concept that yes, it is Quran and Sahih Hadith and that's the end, be it and the end of all. So these are the 4 stages. Now, do I have to follow one of the 4 schools of law? Small. Yeah. Anyone else? Does anyone here not follow the school of law? You know, I'm not going to take you to prison and anything. You know, I'm not going to. If there's anyone here that feel that I don't need to follow school of law, anyone? No, everyone's follows school of law. The ruling of following a school of law for the majority of those that are living at this point on the surface of the earth is compulsory. Because for someone not to follow a school of thought, he needs to have reached a level of ijtihad, a level of talent where he himself can determine whether this mas'ala is the correct mas'ala, whether this mas'ala, the ulama, the fuqaha, the scholars, they have erred, they have made a mistake. Unless we reach that stage of talent, I think we can all safely say that we haven't, then following a school of thought is compulsory. Now, it's the simple thing to do. Because the next question is, are the 4 schools of thought, are they part of the Ahlul Sunnah? Because the message you'll hear that we are following the Quran and Hadith, and the other 4 schools of thought, they don't follow the Quran and Hadith, or they are not from the Ahlul Sunnah. Like I mentioned at the beginning, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Imam Ahmad, they all had the teachers who all went back to the Prophet sallallahu, alaihi, wasallam. So all these 4 schools of thoughts, they are, although they differ in the madhahibs, in the masails, yet they are on the truth and they are part of the Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. They are part of the Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah. What are the benefits for us? The benefits are the homework has been done for us. As they say, if it's not broken, why fix it? The work has been done for us. The scholars, they place great time and effort to do the work, and they've presented it to us. It's simple, all the masail are there. When you have a question, we ask the local imam who will refer to the books and he'll find the answers, and we move on. These are the benefits of following 4 schools of thoughts. Misconceptions of the statement Sahih Hadith and Quran and Sunnah. So, like we spoke about earlier, Sahih Hadith and the misconceptions. As Uncle mentioned, the concept of Sahih Hadith that he understood and many people understand is that it is from the authentic books and it has to be taken. It has to be taken. And this is where usul comes in, you know, the principle that we mentioned. The usuls come in. For example, a few years ago, a person asked me that do I need to read Surah Fatiha behind Imam? Do I need to read Surah Fatiha behind Imam? Because our position is that when the Imam leads the prayer, we don't need to read Surah Al-Fatiha. Whereas Imam Shafi'i, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, they are both of the opinion that you have to read Surah Al-Fatiha. The Imam reads and you have to read behind as well. It's compulsory. So, when I tried to explain to that brother the detail, he said, I just want a hadith. I said, I cannot give you a hadith and expect you to understand. Because I'll give you hadith and you'll give me another hadith to counter argue, and you're not going to understand. So if I was to break down the principle, the usul, then you will have a better idea as to why I don't read hadith. I don't read Surah Al-Fatiha. Now, I'm going to give 2 examples. The hadith states regarding this mas'ala, Surah Al-Fatiha, the Quran says, وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ وَأَنصِتُوا لَعَلَّكُمْ تُرْحَمُونَ. That when the Quran is being recited, فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ, listen attentively, وَأَنصِتُوا لَهُ, and remain silent. Remain silent. So that's a rule, and that's why when a person is reciting Quran, we shouldn't be talking. It is sinful to talk because we are going against the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the hadith states, لا صلاة إلا بفاتحة الكتاب, that there is no salah is accepted except when a person reads Surah Al-Fatiha. So if you don't read Surah Al-Fatiha, your salah is not accepted. So clearly, we've got a mas'ala where there's some contradiction. Because the Quran is saying that when the Imam is reading the Quran, I need to be listening attentively and staying silent. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that if I don't read Surah Al-Fatiha, then my prayers are not done. So what have the Hanafis done? What have they said? They said that according to the usul, if we find a verse in the Quran, then anything after the Quran, we don't need to look at. So we have found a verse in the Quran, it's sufficient for us. It's sufficient for us. It gives us a judgment regarding this mas'ala. That's done. So this is the hadith, this is the usul, the principles of the Hanafiya, Imam Abu Hanifa. So now if you come with the most authentic hadith on the surface of the earth and you present it to Imam Abu Hanifa, he's going to say, my friend, my principle is that if I find something in the Quran, that's sufficient for me. So you can bring the most authentic hadith on earth. I'm not interested. Is that understood?
No, it's very, very good on the subject. You know, we had this little debate with the friends and saying, well, how do you know your Maulana is reading Surah Al-Fatiha? So, you know, the silent ones, obviously you hear. Well, we don't. So he was saying, therefore, you have to read it. But now you said that your namaz is not valid if you don't read it. So he is definitely going to be reading it. He's not going to be reading something else, is he?
Who, the Imam?
Imam.
Yeah.
But his argument was, well, how do you know your Imam is reading it?
Well, if the Imam doesn't read it, then his namaz not valid. So then he,
Exactly. No, yeah. And
you know.
he couldn't answer. He said, well, so how do you know he's reading
because reading Surah Al-Fatiha is compulsory
Yeah.
for the Imam and for the individual who's reading alone. You don't read Surah Fatiha and you don't do Sajda Sahwa, your Salah is invalid. So now when we say that the muqtadi, the person behind, he doesn't have to read, because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ الْإِمَامُ لِيُؤْتَمَّ بِهِ. That the Imam, he's been made Imam to lead. To lead. So if one person, the leader, is delivering, then the rest don't need to deliver. And there's a story about this. During the time of Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Hanifa, some people came to him who weren't in agreement with Imam Abu Hanifa regarding this masala. So they came to him and they said to him that we've heard that you said that if the Imam recites, it's sufficient for the person. So how have you come to this conclusion? So he counted a lot of them. And he said, how many of them are you? And they said, we are about 30, 40. So he said, are all 30, 40 we speaking at the same time? Or is it just one person? And they said, one. He said, you are representing them. Yes. He said, that's the answer. That Imam is representing the muqtadi to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, how true that story is, I don't know, quite genuine, but even if it not logically makes sense, it makes sense. So, what I was trying to say is that the four schools of thought, they follow their own principles. And they don't go outside of the principle that they've set out. So you can bring the Sahih Hadith, most authentic Hadith, it's not going to make a difference. And then I'll give you one more example. Imam Malik, like I mentioned, he was born in Medina, and he lived his full life in Medina. And he passed away in Medina. Now, Imam Malik, after these four, the fifth one, Imam Malik had a fifth one, which was Amalu Ahli al-Medina, the action of the people residing in Medina. The action of the people residing in Medina. And he considered it an important aspect of his usul. So, there was this individual who came to Madinatul Munawwara. Now, the Malikis and Imam Malik, when we do salam, when we finish namaz, okay, we do assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Okay? Now, Imam Malik, they have three options. In certain cases, you only need to do one salam. In other cases, you do three salams. So the Imam, he does salam to the right, in the middle, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and then to the left, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. The muqtadi, the person who's behind, he does the right hand side, and then if there's someone else on the left hand side, he'll do salam that way as well, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And if there's a person there who's only got someone on the right hand side, but there's no one on the left hand side, he'll do salam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Finished. Okay? 3 different times. So, there's this individual, he came to Al-Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he done the 2 salams that we do. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, there was another scholar there who said to him that where did you get these 2 salams from? Because we do 3 or 1 or 2. Where did you get 2 from? So he gave the hadith that Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu anh narrated, that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would do 2 salams. So this person who asked the question, he said, look, your sound hadiths, as sound as they are, I'm not interested in them. Because I saw Imam Malik, who lived his full life in Madinatul Munawwarah, who saw all his companions living in Madinatul Munawwarah do the 3 alternative salams. And Imam Malik saw and learned from Imam Nafi', who lived his full life in Madinatul Munawwarah, who learned from Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anh, and they all resided in Madinatul Munawwarah. It cannot be possible that the people of Madinatul Munawwarah, who were so close in proximity to the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, yet they are going against the hadith, against the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It cannot be possible. So with the Malikis and Malikiyya, you can bring the most authentic Sahih hadith on the surface of the earth. If that goes against the Amalu Ahlul Madinah, he's not interested. He's not interested. The point is that every school of thought, they have their own usul, which they abide by and they follow. Now the other statement, Quran and Sunnah. Honestly, when I hear some people say Quran and Sunnah, that we only follow the Quran and Sunnah and not any school of thought. I can guarantee you, a person who claims that he doesn't follow an Imam and he only follows a Quran and Sunnah, I can guarantee you he follows an Imam as well. And that Imam and that school of thought has its principles. And that principle, whether they call it Quran and Sunnah or whatever they want to call it, it has a set principle. So we all follow. We all have to follow. Because we don't have the talent to access these books. So we have to follow. Now, if I make this claim, and I hope I'm not using these terms in a degrading manner, but more recognition. So modern day Salafism or the Ahlul Hadith, they make this claim that we don't follow an Imam. You can make the greatest claim on the surface of the earth, but we all follow an Imam. Whether that Imam abides by the usul principle that is Quran and Sunnah, then you can abide by that, but you're following an Imam. Now the question is, can you have a school of thought that is simply based on Quran and Sunnah? No. Like I mentioned earlier, Quran, Sunnah, Ijima and Qiyas. These are agreed upon. You have to have them. You have to have them. And there's so many that are, the ulama, they differ upon. Istihsan, istishab, qawl al-sahabi, amal al-Madinah. There's so many, there's difference of opinion that we haven't even got to. So everyone who claims this Quran and Sunnah, really, it's a preposterous claim. You cannot just follow the Quran and Sunnah on its own. Yes, that's the objective. That's the objective. That's your aim. But you have to abide by certain principles for you to get there. Now,
Sorry, Sheikh, I know it's not your topic, the Hadith Qudsi.
uh-huh.
So how does that fit into the, I know you mentioned it on Friday, but in terms of with the other, say, Hadith, so because I have heard of it, but not as the other six.
The sixth what? Sorry?
The other six Hadith, Tirmidhi,
Okay.
Bukhari, Muslim, and
Now, the 6 books, there's 6 books. And in them 6 books, there are hadiths of various levels. Various levels. There are many thousands of books other than these 6 books. There are many. So, this concept that Bukhari and Muslim, again, it's a difficult concept to comprehend for someone like me. That it's not something that if someone genuinely decided to attempt to work his deen of Bukhari and Muslim, it's not going to happen. It's not feasible, it's not possible. It's not possible. Like, coming back, and I know I've mentioned this a few times, the Sahih Hadith. A lot of people have this concept that the Hadith is Sahih, authentic, and anything other than this is weak and cannot be utilized. Again, that's a fallacy, that's something that's wrong. Because when you come into hadith, the field of hadith, you again have usul. You have usul, you have principles. So you have categories, so you have Sahih Hadith. Now Sahih Hadith is not the highest category either. The highest category is the hadith which is considered mutawatir. Now mutawatir hadith are those hadiths that if a person denies mutawatir hadith knowingly, he becomes a kafir. He becomes a kafir. And Sahih hadith, if a person denies it, doesn't make him a kafir. So mutawatir hadith, and coming back to your question, hadith Qudsi. Hadith Qudsi is that hadith which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has uttered the words himself. So all the ahadith that we have, they are revelation upon the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the form and words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whereas hadith Qudsi are those hadiths that are in the form and word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? So that's hadith Qudsi. Now, going to details, I mean, these are to study hadith and the usul al-hadith, it takes years. It can't be done over a seminar and webinar, right? But just some of the important points that we cannot assume the modern day concept that look, this Sahih hadith and I'm taking this, and because it's not Sahih hadith, I'm not taking this. Who are you to judge what's a Sahih hadith? Who are you and I to judge what's a Sahih hadith? Now I'm going to conclude on this. We all know, or we probably heard, that Imam Muslim and Imam Bukhari, they have the two most authentic books after the Quran. So they've compiled a hadith in their books, and they're considered the two most authentic after the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. Now, there are so many ahadith that Imam Muslim has placed in his book which Imam Bukhari hasn't. Now the question is why? Is it Imam Bukhari wasn't aware of the hadith? No. No, he wasn't. He was aware of the hadith. So why didn't he consider that hadith and place it in his books? Because again, these Imams, Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim, they had a set of principles themselves. They had usul themselves. They had usuls which they followed as well. That look, if this person or this hadith fits into my criteria, I'm going to place it in this book. If not, then I'm not interested. And in certain instances, and I will conclude on this, Imam Bukhari, and I'm not saying he did see it, but he may have heard this hadith from, so I've heard this hadith from Mushtaq Bhai, who's heard this hadith from, your name? Sir? Naeem. Okay. So he's heard from Naeem, who's heard from Hamza, Hanif, who's heard from Usman. Now, this narration is a authentic narration. Everyone here is sound. But once I saw Mushtaq Bhai, and I saw him eating whilst he was walking. So it occurs to me that if a person he's walking and eating, which is going against the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then you know what? It doesn't fit into my criteria. So although the hadith is sound, but because my criteria and my principles I've set down, I've set a high standard. I've set a very high standard. So because this doesn't fit into my high standard, I'm not going to take it in. But Imam Muslim, his standard is not as high as Imam Bukhari. Or it might be different to Imam Bukhari. So he thinks, you know what, I'll overrule Mushtaq by walking and eating, I'll take the hadith. So what does it boil down to? The principle that they all set down. And this is what usul al-fiqh is about. Usul al-fiqh, the principles of jurisprudence, this is what it is about. So when you understand these principles that every school of thought has, then we will definitely come to the conclusion that it's in my best interest to follow one particular school of thought. And when we fail to understand this, then we have this commotion within communities and confusion. And that's what's happening. People are confused that, should I follow the Quran and Sunnah or should I follow one of the school of thoughts? That's a confusing question itself. Because the school of thoughts, they are from the Quran and Sunnah. They are from the Ahlul Sunnah. You follow them, you will be guided. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك. If anyone got any questions, we can do so. Apologies for the confusion. See? Any questions?
One question.
Say again, if you can speak loudly.
I think that was really insightful. I think ultimately it comes down to the principles.
Uh-huh.
I understood that quite well today. So my question was, we should follow one madhab, one school of thought, but can you be flexible on that? So do you have to follow one to the T, or certain rules? Can you be lenient? Or?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, because that was one of the points I was supposed to have mentioned. It's called talfiq, where you follow according to your desires, really. So you pick and choose. And the simple answer is no. Because you wouldn't know, if you don't have the ability, if you don't have the knowledge, you wouldn't know where to start from, where to end. Like, why would you take a mas'ala from one particular, say, why would you take a mas'ala from Imam Shafi'i? How have you come to the conclusion that, look, you know, I'll take this mas'ala? Do I have the knowledge? Do I have the capability to say that, look, you know what, he's correct and we're wrong? So it goes back to the point that we mentioned earlier, ijtihad, that talent, that only when you have the capability and ability to disagree with an imam and with all the qualities that you have, then maybe so. But like I said, on the surface of the earth, there are very, very few. Very, very few. You know, that can do that.
I know crops up with the witr namaz, with the early hadith guys that they read one and say, why are you reading three?
So I'll do two examples. One it's say like witr, we read three, and they read 2 on 1. Okay. Now, if someone decides for witr namaz, he wants to do 2 on 1. My question would be, what's your evidence?
But do we not agree that all 4 school of thoughts are correct to their,
Yeah.
but according to their principle?
According to the principle, yeah. So,
Is it not correct?
is it, sorry?
So is it not correct to like?
No, because,
Are they both not correct or all of them correct?
no. The, what's not correct? The school of thoughts are.
The rule
Yeah,
being-
you know, reading one witr instead of 3. I think that's what your one's trying to
Yeah,
do.
so
Okay.
how they pray with her, is that right?
Yeah.
How we pray, is that right?
So, what we say is everyone on the haqq. All 4 school of thought, they're on the haqq. Okay? They're all guided. But when you go deeper into this, when you speak to the fuqaha and what they write, they will categorically say that the rest have erred and made a mistake, and we are correct. So there's a difference between being correct and made a mistake and being on the haqq as well. So remember, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, إذا أخطأ المجتهد فله أجر وإذا أصاب فله أجران أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. That when a mujtahid, when a faqih, scholar, when he makes a mistake, he will be rewarded. And if he is correct in the mas'ala, he will be given double reward. So, yes, so that if you go to the Hanafi scholars and the Usuli, they will say that, you know, the other 3, they have made mistakes in their principles. No one will say that they're not on the truth, they're the haqq, but they have made mistakes, and the principle that we have set out, this is the correct set of principle. And likewise, vice versa. They would say the same thing about us. Now, coming back to our question, your question, can we pick and choose? The issue becomes, so for example, say in Imam Shafi'i, according to them, if you bleed, your wudu doesn't break. And the rest of the ulama say it does break. So if you decide to follow Imam Shafi'i in that mas'ala and you're a Hanafi, you know, you have to have valid reason as to why you've gone there. Because if you've gone there, and you're going to confuse yourself. Because my school of thought says that my wudu is broken, but Imam Shafi'i says it doesn't break. So either you're going there because it's your desires, right? Because I don't want to do wudu. Either that, or you've got some evidences. Now, if you've got some evidences, background, and you have the talent, then fabiha wa ni'ma. Or not want to, you know, great for you.
That's what we look for. We look for the easy way rather than actually a soul and principle. And you say, no, okay, it'll do. If they're doing it, I'm not doing it.
So that's why the problem. Where would you stop then?
Yeah, true. Yeah, that's true.
Where would you stop? Because, okay, you know, this one mas'ala, you've decided to follow Imam Shafi'i. But then, say, for example, you decide Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, they combine between prayers.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know what, I'm traveling. I'll just combine between.
What about is there a circumstance where it'll allow you to pray? For example, if you combine the prayer, you might be able to catch asr.
Sorry, say again?
Say, for example, there's an instance where, I don't know, you're traveling or something, and if you combine your prayer, you'll be able to pray Asr on time according to if you can combine it. But if you didn't combine it, you'd say perhaps you've got on a plane or something, you're going to miss Asr. Can you do it in that instance? Or?
So, like, you know, in the Hanafiya, they also have combination as well. Basically, what Hanafis, they say, that look, you want to combine between Zuhr and Asr, read Asr, read Zuhr at the end time. So if Asr beginning time is 2:45, read Zuhr at 2:40, read Asr at 2:45, and get on with your life. So you combined between the two prayers, you've read in their own time as well. Do you understand? So that is possible.
I get that.
Mhm.
So
That is.
sometimes you can't due to timing.
So, like say, I think what you're alluding to is, say, you're on the plane.
Yeah, stuff like
You're on the plane. But if you're on the plane, there are facilities to pray. Like when you see a person sitting down, sitting on a chair and reading prayers, that's because he's got an uzr, he's got a reason. So the Sharia has allowed him to read on the chair. So likewise, we're on the plane, we can't stand up unless if it's Saudi Airlines and you have some space. You can't stand up. So then the Sharia has allowed us to sit down and read. So we can work it out and read whilst we're sitting on the plane. Answer the question. Anyone else?
What if you are from the Shafi'i back? If you basically, if you're following Shafi'i, for example, I'm from a Shafi'i background.
Okay.
And I'm following this masjid. So, considering the the Fatiha, reading the Fatiha along with Imam and all those things. So, what should I?
What would you do?
Yeah.
You would read. Because that's your school of thought.
Sometimes I probably I won't get much time to read complete the Fatiha.
Mhm.
Because Imam goes to the ruku.
The Hanafi Imams, we read quick, huh? It does because, like, you know, in the Shafi'i and Hanbali madhab, the Imam deliberately will stop at the end of every ayah and give it a slight, a second or so for the muqtadi to read. So you will make your effort to read behind the Imam, and that's your madhab, and you follow that madhab. And there's no harm in that, in following that madhab.
You speak of it.
Keep it up. If you're a Shafi, you're the only Shafi, I'm assuming, then you need to uphold the Imam Shafi's school of thought. So, did you have a question? Did you have a question?
I was just going to ask, you said we shouldn't pick and choose
Uh-huh.
between the four schools, and you should follow one
Mhm.
and stick to it. Now, in choosing which one do you follow, you base that, from what I understand you were saying, that you base it on what feels right to you, from your learning and whatever you know about the
Uh-huh.
school, you pick one and you follow it.
You mean one school or one masala?
The one school.
Okay, one school.
That's what you said, isn't it, I think?
You follow a school of thought, yeah?
Yeah, you don't follow more than one, you follow one.
Yeah, you follow one.
You follow one.
Yeah.
And you select that based on what feels right for you and what your understanding is of it. So, if you have someone who is undecided, okay, and there are many people who are undecided, full of doubt, should I follow this school, should I follow that school, or the other school? So, in that situation, how would you advise somebody, who is facing that dilemma?
Okay, so if a person is full of doubt or in doubt as to which school of thought he should follow, my advice to him would be that you follow the school of thought which you were born on. Okay? Now, that's not a necessity, but if, like I said, all four schools of thought, they're on the guided path. Okay? So whichever school you follow, you will be guided, and you are on the truth and haqq. Now, if a person is living in an area, and we have a global village now, where a certain madhab was dominant, and there was no access to the madhab that he is following. So if, for example, our Shafi'i brother is here, and he doesn't have access to Shafi school of thought, which you do now, because it's a global village, you can get in touch with anyone, then you would follow the school of thought which is in your area. So if it's Hanafi, follow the Hanafis, because, or if it's Maliki, then it's Maliki, or if it's Hanbali, then Hanbali, because what we'll do, all your masails, your solutions will be found there for you. So if we have this concept in our mind, that all four school of thoughts are on the truth, they are guided and they are haqq and they are going to lead us to Jannah, then really the idea of being in a state of doubt shouldn't occur. Because if I'm in a state of doubt, then I'm doubting, is this right or is this wrong? So who am I to determine is this right or is this wrong? So when we have the concept that everyone's in truth, then it should.
I think most people are very guilty of overthinking, and trying to find the perfect answer when actually we don't have the ability to find the perfect answer. And whatever the issue is, everybody has an opinion and will claim, theirs is better than yours. There are many people who are, sitting on the fence most of the time. Am I on this side, am I over there, and so on. So I guess the answer to the question is, don't overthink it. Keep it simple. So either you follow what you are born into, or the community that you're part of. Or if you have the ability to research it and sort of find out for yourself, and then you decide to follow a different school, then that's your choice.
Yeah, so the problem now is there's so much confusion. So much confusion. Like I said, there's so many people on the fence. Why are they on the fence? Because there's confusion, there's this explosion of information and knowledge.
It's also, Sheikh, because turning to the, like, for me, I read quite sort of widely. But if I'm not sure on something, then I'll come to you, Maulana, whoever, say, look, what's your opinion on that? So, one of the problems is that we don't go to the right source to find the correct answer. I mean, on the internet, you've got everything these days. And that's what's confusing. Instead of saying, no, hang on, you said that. Let me just clarify that with my local Maulana, and then it's done.
Yeah, that's the simple answer. That's the simple answer. We, like you said, we're not going to the right source. We're seeing on YouTube, and it's sad to say, but we all want instant answers. We're not interested in, looking at a 2-hour YouTube video where someone might be detailing a response. We just want a 2-minute shorts, 2-minute, all the answers in there, and I want to move on with life. That's where the problem is. And the global village that we have, the internet and the social media, it's just an explosion. And there's just so much confusion out there.
That yourself, that you studied all your life. Maulana's course is 7 years, I think, probably something like 7 years. And another 3 years to become a mufti. And so the time is taken. But I said we want this in 2 seconds, 2 minutes. And we want an answer.
That's where the issue and that's where the problem is. So my advice would be always go back to your local imam, the imam that you trust. Because a person, and I think I mentioned a few times in Darul Mahmoud, that a person who's on YouTube, he can give a bayan, but I don't know him personally. I don't know his personality. I don't know how he is off the camera. But my local imam, I know how pious he is. I know how much he adheres to the Sunnah. I know his qualities. So when I see the good qualities in the imam, okay, you know what, I'll place my trust in the imam and I'll speak to him.
Plus, you know his source, where he's come from. You know, like yourself, you know where you studied all your life. So, you know, that's another thing. There is someone on there, we don't know what his background is, where he studied, what he's got.
Exactly. So, any other questions? No? Okay.
Just want to quickly say Jazakallah khair for Maulana Sahib for taking us through that. Our next event is coming up as well, inshallah, on the 25th of February, which is a youth event, My Prophet, My Role Model, which will be run by Mufti Abdul Aziz. So please put that in your diaries. The 25th of February, inshallah, will be our next youth event. Okay, Maulana Sahib.
اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وعملا صالحا متقبلا ورزقا حلالا طيبا وشفاء من كل داء. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع وعين لا تدمع وقلب لا يخشع ودعاء لا يسمع. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذريتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين.